So welcome to this debate organized to remember in the occasion of the anniversary of the death of Altiero Spinelli, which occurred 30 years ago, one of the founding fathers of the European Union. And welcome to Mr. Verhofstadt, President of the Liberal and Democrats in the European Parliament. Thanks for your time. Mr. Verhofstadt will answer to some questions from universities and schools in Italy who are watching us today, the 23rd of May. This debate has been organized by the Movimento Federalista Europeo, l'Istituto Affari Internazionali Italiano, both founded by Altiero Spinelli himself, l'Associazione Universitaria Studi Europei e, of course, l'Università per l'Europa verso l'Unione Politica. I'm Alessio Pisano, Italian and European, I must say, freelance journalist in Brussels. We are already receiving some questions. The first one is from Francisco Gui, Università per l'Europa, Professor Gui. It's a general question. Mr. Verhofstadt, what is the main political and cultural message of Altiero Spinelli in Europe?
I think the main message was that we need to create a European democratic space to have a real European Union. For him, it was unthinkable that you could have what we got in the beginning of the European Union, a supranational Europe without a well-functioning European democracy. And that's the reason why already from the beginning in the 50s, because he was already involved in the 50s in this, he requested, he asked for a European Parliament that was directly elected and could control the European institutions. A direct European Parliament directly elected. And in fact, he achieved already this in the 50s, because in the 50s already, in 53, there was a constitution ready, made by the founding fathers, Altiero Spinelli, Enric von Brantano, Paul-Henri Spaak, and in that proposal in 1953, it was already foreseen to have a European Parliament, scrutinizing the European policies, making the link with the European citizens. And then it failed, that European Constitution, because of a vote in the French National Assembly in 1954. And so we got only the European Parliament later on in 1979. So it's because Spinelli continued the battle for a European space for democracy, European democracy, that we have today. This
all this around.
Yeah.
We have another question from Umberto Morelli, Università di Torino. The European Parliament is orphan of Altiero Spinelli. Don't you think that a new initiative such as the Crocodile Club is more than needed nowadays?
Well, I think what we need is not so much crocodile clubs or dinners in the crocodile, even when it is a very good restaurant, the best restaurant in Strasbourg. So Altiero Spinelli knew very well where he has to go to eat something in this city. But now what we really need is courage of our European political leaders to start a convention and to put new foundations under the European Union. This European Union is not sustainable anymore. This European Union, as it works today, as it functions today, will disappear. And maybe the best message has been given by the Pope a few weeks ago, when he received the Charlemagne Prize in Rome. And normally it's in Aachen, but it was this time in Rome. He received this prize and he did a speech, a very important intervention. He said, well, look, to solve our problems, it's not longer useful or not longer sufficient to make small changes in a number of articles of one or other treaty. What we need is to lay down, is to find and to establish new foundations for this for Europe, and that is exactly what is at stake. This European Union of today is still a loose confederation of nation states, based on the unanimity rule, and it doesn't work in the world of today. The world of today is a globalized world. Everything goes very fast, and this European Union is always reacting too late, doing too little, and so we need other foundations. We need new foundations for the European Union, based on a real European government, a real European Parliament with full powers, a budget that is a real budget and not the 1%. As we have today, and so on and so on. So what I find so important is that, already Obama in a speech in Hanover a few weeks ago said it, but the Pope was even more clear than Obama in his appeal to the European political leaders to say now the time is there to give new foundations to the European Union.
You're talking about new foundations, and we have a question here from Massimo Fragola, Università della Calabria. The relationship between national and European sovereignty must be rethought. So this maybe is something that
what we clearly need is European capacities to tackle the problems. So what we are facing today is not one problem. We are facing what I call a polycrisis.
Who is to blame? Asked Mr. Fragola.
Well, politics mainly national political leaders. We don't want to transfer a part of their sovereignty to the European level, and you see it every time when you look to, for example, the refugee crisis. Then you see the refugee crisis is there because we don't have a common foreign policy, we don't have a common defense community, we don't do anything about the conflict in Syria, we don't have a common asylum system because Dublin is not a common asylum system, it's the opposite of a European asylum system. We don't have a European border and coast guard, it's still national. If you look then to the other crisis, the crisis on terrorism, we don't have a common intelligence capacity. Or a Europol that is competent to start transnational investigations in Europe, like the FBI can do it in the US. If you look to the Euro crisis, we don't have an economic government in Europe, one real government in Europe. We don't have a treasury behind the single currency. If you look to the geopolitical weakness, it's the same. So every time when you analyze the different crises we are seeing today, it are crises because of a lack of European capacities. And we think, or political leaders think, that they can solve it with more coordination. And so that's the buzzword for the moment. If there is a problem on terror, on security, on refugees, on migrants, on economics, I say, we're going to solve it, we're going to do more coordination between the nation states. But it doesn't work, because it's always too little too late that we act. And so what we need is European capacities. For example, on terror, we need a European intelligence capacity. Including investigation powers for Europol. We need to tackle the refugee crisis, a European asylum system and a European border and coast guard. So that's the main problem of today. The disease of Europe is that we think that with a loose coordination between 28 member states we can solve the problems, and that's not true. That's a lie.
And to this respect, what can the Parliament do to create a stronger European consciousness, even between the citizenship? Asked Fabio Zucca, University of Insubria.
What we have to do is to push forward for this fundamental review of the treaties and of our institutions. That is what we need to do. So my proposal is that in Rome, so in Italy, 60 years after the approval of the Treaty of Rome, because that happened, so it's going to be next year on the 25th of March, we're going to have the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. Well, I think it's a good idea at that moment of the 60th anniversary to launch a new process, a new institutional process to review, to make this, to reform this European Union in a more fundamental way, and to launch that process. And we have a good reason to do so, because we have in the meanwhile the Brexit. If it is a yes or a no, I don't know, but in any way, did oblige us, this discussion with Great Britain, to change our treaties. If it is a yes, we need to put the agreement in the treaty. And if it is a no, we need to define a new status, a new statute for Britain. So in any case, a change of the treaty is needed to solve that problem. So let's use that momentum to prepare a more in-depth reform of the European Union, to create a European defense community, to create a European energy union, what is not existing today, to develop European intelligence and security capacities, and so on and so on.
You said the forbidden word, which is Brexit, within the institutions nowadays. We have Mr. Anselmi, Giorgio Anselmi, Movimento Federalista Europeo, who asks the European institution, therefore also the European Parliament, just look to be waiting for the referendum in the UK. What do you think the EU should do after the referendum, with no regard to its result, in order to boost the governance of the Eurozone and toward a deeper political and federal union?
But so, like I said, start this reform of the treaties so that we can strengthen the governance inside the Eurozone. That's absolutely necessary. Establish a government for the Eurozone, a budget for the Eurozone, a treasury for the Eurozone, because let's be honest, this cannot continue the way we work today, because in my opinion, a state can exist without a currency, but the currency cannot exist without a state. So there is enough proof of the fact that the state can exist without a currency, using the currency of another country, the dollar or the euro or whatsoever. But a single currency cannot exist without a state. Without an authority behind it. And it's not enough to have the European Central Bank, because the European Central Bank has only limited powers. So we need also a budget, a treasury, a government, so to have a more coherent economic policy in the Eurozone to strengthen the euro and to make the euro more safer.
And the road toward a common defense policy, you already said something about that. Ask Gianni Bomicini of Istituto Affari Internazionali. How do you foresee this path?
Well, it's obvious that we don't take our responsibilities in our neighborhoods, and we are the victim of that. When something is happening in Ukraine, it are the Americans and the Russians who decide. If something is happening there is a war, an ongoing war for the moment in Syria. It's not we who are deciding. It's the Americans or the Russians who are deciding. Nevertheless, the consequences of that conflict in Syria are for the Europeans. It's we who are feeling and seeing the consequences of this conflict in Syria. So I think we need to take our responsibility in our neighborhood. And not to think, oh, it are the Americans who are resolving that problem. And that's exactly also what Obama said a few weeks ago when he was in Europe, and when he said in Hanover, it's over now. It is because his bad experience with the Europeans in Libya, he didn't want to intervene in Syria, because everybody asking himself, the Americans intervened in Iraq where nobody was asking for an intervention, and created an enormous mess in Iraq. And here is the opposite. In Syria, the democratic forces asked for an intervention in Syria, and Obama said, no, I don't do it. Why? Because he doesn't have any confidence anymore in the Europeans. He said, but the Europeans are like free riders. They ask us to do the job, and they do nothing themselves. And he's right. And this is not only a policy of Obama, it's going to be the policy of all next presidents of the US. It's over. The time that we thought, let the Americans do, they're gonna pay, they're gonna manage it, they're gonna bomb Belgrade at the moment of the Kosovo wars, they're gonna liberate us from Gaddafi, like it was the case in Libya with the bombings on the troops of Gaddafi near to Benghazi. That's over. The Americans said, no, you have to put in order your own house. You have to be responsible for the geopolitical environment in your own neighborhood. It's not America who can.
Talking about the territory, we have a question from Marco Mascia, Associazione Universitaria Studi Europei. After the Euro, are in favor of establishing a primary European citizenship based on human rights and European use solely? So that's exactly what he meant. Do you think that the European fundamental rights is good for this direction to establish a right on the...
Well, we have a number of values in Europe. The problem is that that we have also a crisis around this value, because if you look to what is happening in Poland and in Hungary and but certainly in Hungary the last years, but also now in Poland, we see that a number of these member states don't apply the European values and the European principles. So that weakens us internally and externally. That weakens us externally because we are not longer have the moral authority to defend towards other countries or principles, because we don't apply them inside the Union, and it weakens us also inside the European Union because there is an opposition between countries fulfilling the conditions and the values and respecting the values and the principles of the European Union, and then countries, for example, like Hungary and Poland, who are not doing that, and that is geopolitically. That's also one of the risks with the Brexit. The main risk with the Brexit, the main risk with the crisis in Poland for the moment is not economically, is more geopolitically. The fact that we weaken our continent, we are divided in our continent, there is a split in Europe, and that is in the advantage of autocratic leaders like Erdogan, like Vladimir Putin, who likes a divided Europe. And so the main reason why I hope that in the referendum on Brexit in Great Britain, majority of the citizens will vote in favor. The main reason why I hope they vote in favor is that they understand that an exit of Great Britain should weaken Europe and should weaken also Britain.
I will go back to the Spinelli questions, taking two questions together from Paola Marsocchi, Sapienza, Università di Roma, who asks what is the Spinelli Group and what are your goals and what are you doing right now, and another question about that of Claudio Cressati, Università di Udine, as regarding to the crisis, which are the initiatives on the short and long run that the Spinelli Group proposed to restart this integration?
Mainly what the Spinelli Group is doing is to support all political forces in Europe who are federalist, pro-European and federalist. Because we have to tell that, to underline that federalism, European federalism, doesn't mean a superstate. What it means is that we create a democratic, supranational Europe who is capable to find solutions for challenges on the European level. It's not to replace the nation states. It's to have a very efficient European and democratic body on the European level, because we need it desperately. And that is what the Spinelli Group is doing. The Spinelli Group has more than 100 members of the European Parliament today, and also thousands and thousands of ordinary citizens. And what we try to do is to push forward this federal agenda, not an agenda for a European superstate or a bureaucratic superstate, but the agenda of a more federal and integrated European Union. And not to continue with this loose confederation of nation states based on the unanimity, who is a failure for the moment. So the Spinelli group is as critical maybe towards this European Union as, for example, Eurosceptics. But the big difference is that where a Eurosceptic will propose to go back in time and to go back to the so-called certainty of the nation states, we are saying, no, this problem can only be solved by a new step forward in the integration of the European Union. A new step forward in the integration of the European Union in the sense of a federal union, a federal organization in which every level has its own responsibilities, the national, the local and the European level.
Unfortunately, we have almost run out of time, so we take the last questions. We have Luciano Bardi from Pisa University about federal approach of Spinelli. He reminds us that it was not limited only to the old continent, but to the old world. What is left today of this original thought? What political leaders are still pursuing the same ideal?
Now, what we need naturally is not only to combine all forces on the European level, also on the world level it's necessary. So what I see is emerging a world order which is completely different of the world order of the past. The world order of the past was based on a number of strong nation states, mainly European nation states. And that was the world order of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. It was Russia and Britain and Germany and France and Austria, Austrian Empire. That were the concept of Europe. That was the denomination. Today, this word has completely disappeared. The word of today is a word of empires. I hope empires of the good, not empires of the bad. Empires like China, empires like India, like Russia, like the US. And that are not nation states. China, for example, is not a nation state. China is a civilization, like Europe is a civilization. India, for example, is not a nation or one ethnic. No, there are more than 2,000 ethnies living in India. More than 20 different languages are spoken in India. There are 4 big religions in India. So in India, this is the biggest democracy worldwide. But it's a continent. It's far more than and it's the same for the US and so on. So what we need to understand is that the future of Europe is not in such a world, a new world of empires, can be based on nation states. It has to be based on a federal organization on the continental level.
We take the last questions from Daniela Preda, Università di Genova, something related to the European budget. In order to improve the development in policies in the developing countries, how would you change the European budget?
Now, there are a number of things to change in the European budget. First of all, to make it a serious budget and not 1% of the European GDP. Secondly, to make it a real budget that means that it is financed by own resources, by the citizens directly, and not by subsidies from the nation states, because the European budget today is mainly for 80%. Subsidies going back to the nation states. So the nation states pay a subsidy, and then the subsidy goes back to the same nation states. So the real European budget is only a real small amount. So we need a real budget based on our resources, and then 3 on helping on the less developed countries worldwide. We need to foresee that this budget is also can be used to help these countries. That's not the case today, because the money for the less developed countries that we put together on the European level is in a separate budget, in a separate fund, not in the European budget. So the unity of the European budget is also a very important element.
So thanks very much. Before leaving you, I would like to ask myself the final questions, if I can. We said what Europe needs. Do you see some politicians in Europe, other than you, of course, that can go in that direction? Do you see politicians?
I hope that our leaders, our national political leaders today, with their back against the wall, will do what is necessary, because they see that their approach, saying, yeah, okay, we're going to try to solve that problem on the national level, doesn't work. So I hope that in the coming months and the coming 2 years, there will be this pressure on them to go forward in this process. And secondly, let's be very honest, if there is not enough courage in the actual leadership to do that step forward, it are the young people who have to who will deal with this.
So you see someone that could run this process maybe in Europe.
Yeah, and
there are politicians.
I think there can be there are politicians to do that, but mainly what we need is pressure from the public opinion, from the younger generation, who is to push our political leaders to make such a jump forward.
Thanks very much.